So good morning. I do want to say I checked up on the questions. If you guys remember the anonymous questions that you guys can ask, it's on Schoology. So again, if you forgot or you have a question that you want to ask, you can always go on to Schoology. It's anonymous. I won't know who it's from. So I checked it yesterday. Was it yesterday? Maybe this morning. There was about 22 questions so far. Not bad, but I have 6 health classes this year. So come on, ask your questions. We're going to have a fun time kind of answering all of them and going through that. Okay. So just remember that. Today, we are going to be talking about the female reproductive system. Last class, the last 2 classes actually, we spent a lot of time on the male reproductive system. And again, remember, when I use the term male and female, because, we are talking about genitalia and how the physical body works, I use those 2 terms in reference to talking about the genitalia, but there are different identities. People identify differently. And just because you have a certain genitalia does not mean that you identify with the same gender that you were born at birth. These are things that we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks. I think it's very important for us to learn and educate ourselves and be knowledgeable over the different types of genders, how people identify, pronouns, etc. So really good stuff, really confusing stuff too. Listen, if you were taught a certain thing or you think a certain thing, it can be hard to kind of get your mind out of that and open yourself up a little bit to other people. And so we're going to kind of talk about that over the next couple weeks. So I think it's going to be fun. All right, so let's get started with some notes. So from the last 2 classes, in addition to this class, you guys are going to have some really, really good notes. It's really going to help you for your test. One thing I'd like to say is your nervous system test was already due last week. Can you guys take a guess how many people did not take the test? Take a wild guess. 6. Nice guess. He said 5. 6 people. That was just this class. You guys should have seen my other classes. At one point, I had 17 students in just one of my classes. 17. That's more than half. I was like, ah! Now, could you imagine how many messages do you think I've gotten over the weekend from students? Oh, I forgot, please. Oh. And as you guys know, we had a week and a half to do it. So the answer is no. Right? You learn a lesson, you move on. So today we are going to be talking about the female reproductive system. Okay? In the male reproductive system, we talked about sperm. Can someone remind us what is sperm in the male reproductive system? What is it? Who remembers? You guys can look back at your notes and see what you guys wrote down. You can unmute yourself, or if anyone in front of me wants to take a guess. What's sperm? Who remembers?
It's the male sex cell.
Yeah, the male sex cell, male reproductive cell, okay? So females also have a reproductive cell, a sex cell, and it's called ovum. And it's just the egg. All right? And the plural version of that would be ova. Just in case I use that term, ova, it's the same thing. All right? Ovum is the egg. And the eggs inside of a female body is about the size of a pinhead. So think about a pin, the head of the pin. That's how big it is. Tiny, teeny, tiny, teeny. All right. So this is usually released about once a month. This egg, it's released from another area of the reproductive system, which we'll talk about. And if it doesn't get fertilized, it will dissolve, be absorbed by the body, and go away. All right? And it's usually released once a month. from the ovary. We'll talk about that in a few moments. How about now, actually? We'll talk about it right now. So the ovary is actually what holds the ova, the eggs, okay? Females have 2 ovaries, usually. And when a little baby is born, right, a female at birth child is born, they already contain about 300,000 to 500,000 eggs at birth. So when you think about the opposite, when you think about males, when they're born, they don't have sperm, okay? When they reach puberty, their testicles begin to create sperm, and then they mature over time, and that's how that works, right? But females, when they're born, little baby, they already have their eggs. Now, obviously, they're not mature yet, but they already have them, which is why at a certain age, right, women go through something called menopause, which, at a certain time in someone's life, they're no longer able to have children. The egg no longer, comes out once a month, or if they do, they're not viable. They're maybe not matured. They're too old, right? That was a joke. But that's what that is. That's menopause. And then women can't have babies at that time. And gentlemen, actually, males can reproduce if they're 100. Obviously, as you get older, things can go wrong in the body, but technically, sperm can be produced and stored in the male until they're very old. So, sperm is to ovum as testicles is to what? Sperm is to ovum as testicles is to
Ovary?
ovary. Good. So the ovary is kind of like the ball sack, but it's not really a ball sack. It's more like an ovum sac. It's an ova sac. All right. And if you guys remember, the testicles produce the male sex hormone testosterone, and the ovaries produce the female sex hormones. In this case, there's 2. Does anyone know the name of one of the, we kind of talked about it last class, one of the female hormones? I told you, males and females both have this hormone, but the levels are different.
Estrogen.
Yes, yes. Estrogen. And then the other one is progesterone. Good. Moving on to the fallopian tubes. And again, in a few minutes, when we're finished this part, you guys will be able to see a picture of this, and you're going to label it. You'll be able to see exactly what we're talking about here. And you'll be able to see exactly how it's fitted in the female body. A lot of people think that this is a huge, part of the body. It's actually about this big. It's not that big at all. Okay. So the fallopian tube is a passageway for the egg from the ovary to the uterus. It is also the place where fertilization occurs. Now, someone tell me, what is fertilization? Take a guess. What do you guys think? Think of a flower. What is fertilization? Come on. You guys know this. I'll give you a hint. It has to do with an egg and the male version of that sex cell.
It's when the sperm and egg combine.
There you go. Okay, fertilization is where when the sperm meets the egg. Fertilization is where when the sperm meets the egg. When the sperm enters the egg, now you have a fertilized egg, and that will move down into the uterus, right? And multiply, and then you have an embryo. And we'll talk about the stages between a fertilized egg, what is it called? After a few weeks, it's now turned a different word, and then it's an embryo, right? Before it comes out into the world and is a baby. And we'll talk about that. Any questions so far? Man, it's Monday, you can tell. The uterus. A lot of people think fertilization happens in the uterus, okay? It does not, so please remember that. Test question. Woo, excuse me, I promise it's not the vid. The uterus is a pear-shaped muscular organ where a baby develops. Pear-shaped muscular organ where a baby develops. So what happens is, and you know what? I think this might make it easier if I go ahead and open a new page and I show you a little diagram as we talk here. And I think it might help a little bit more. So if you see here, this pear-shaped, it's kind of like an upside down pear, okay? This whole thing here is the uterus, okay? This large white circle and this are both the ovaries. One ovary here, one ovary there. Inside of the ovary, you can't really see, but inside are the thousands and hundreds of thousands of eggs, or ova, right? Plural of ovum. This tube right here, one over there, and then one over here, the fallopian tube. All right? Make sense? So once a month, we talked about an egg is released into the fallopian tube. Fertilization happens here. So we're going to talk about the vagina in a moment, but through here come the sperm. This is the vagina right here. It goes up into the uterus and then it looks for the sperm, tries to find the egg. Sperm tries to find the egg. It'll go into the fallopian tube, and inside the fallopian tube is where fertilization occurs. All right? Once that occurs, if that occurs, that fertilized egg will move its way down into the uterus, which is this entire thing. And then it'll attach itself here to the sides or the walls of the uterus. That make sense? Good. So then moving forward here, as I mentioned, the uterine lining is the lining of the uterus that I was just talking about, that it attaches itself to the side or the wall of the uterus. It's just called the uterine lining, okay? It's the lining of the uterus. This is where that fertilized egg attaches. Now you see the term blastocyst. I'm going to get rid of this word here. The term blastocyst is just the fertilized egg. All right? The uterine lining is also called the endometrium. It's just another term for it. Does that make sense? Does anybody want me to show you the diagram again? Or did that make sense? If not, please let me know and I will definitely show it to you, no problem. All right, the cervix. Is the mouth or the opening of the uterus, and it's the uppermost part of the vagina. The cervix is the mouth or the opening of the uterus into the uppermost part of the vagina. So I'll go down to the other one, to the last term here, and then I'll go back to the diagram and I'll show you guys. All right. And of course, the last part is the vagina, the last term here. The vagina is the passageway from the uterus to the outside of the body. It is also where a woman gives birth from. So it's also known as like a birth canal. All right, this word right here, because that's where the baby kind of passes through for delivery. There's many different kind of functions here. In addition to that, it's the passageway for menstrual flow. So if you don't know what that means, period. Vagina is also where sexual intercourse happens. And the vagina has the ability to expand, contract during intercourse and during childbirth. Lots of different parts there. So it's where the baby comes out of during delivery. It's the passageway for a girl's period, menstrual cycle. It's where penetration of sexual intercourse occurs. And during childbirth and intercourse, the vagina can expand and contract. I just want to go back here and show you this picture, okay? So we talked about the ovaries. The ova or the eggs are inside. They release once a month. 1 month they'll release from here, the other month they'll release from here. It switches every month, okay? Hey, sometimes you can have 2 pop out. Who knows? This is the fallopian tube where they go into to get into the uterus. The fallopian tube is also where fertilization occurs. This whole upside down pear looking thing is the uterus. This is where that fertilized egg will multiply and divide and grow. This uterus is what makes a woman's belly really big. So this tiny little uterus, which is usually like this big, will grow to what you guys see when somebody gets very, very, very pregnant. That's how big it can get, okay? That fertilized egg will attach itself here to the side or the wall of the uterus, known as the uterine lining, also known as the endometrium, okay? This area right here is the cervix. It's between the uterus and the vagina. It's the uppermost part of the vagina, right here. And this is the vagina. All right. You guys are going to have an assignment in a moment where you're going to see the picture is going to look very similar to this, but on the side, there's also going to be a picture of a female body, and it's going to kind of show you how it looks when it's in the female. You'll know what I'm talking about in a few moments when you have that. All right. So what you guys are going to do for your assignment is you are going to go on to Schoology. I'm going there now so that I can open it for you. It is not yet published, so you will not see it because I want to explain it to you. Much like the male reproductive system, when you had that assignment last class, you are going to open that and you have 3 chances to take that assessment. There's 6 terms there. We learned 6 terms for the female reproductive system, a lot shorter than the male. So what you're going to do is you're going to match the term to the correct location by dragging that to that correct location. If you get a couple things wrong, you can go back and fix it and look at your notes, make sure it matches, but you have 3 chances to do that, up to 6 points for today. Right now I'm going there. It is called 315 assignment, female diagram. It is now published, so you can go there and get that done. I do not want anyone to leave yet when you finish, except for those who are all caught up with all assignments. There might be a few of you that I might kind of ask to speak to real fast into a breakout room, kind of have a little chat, little one-on-one real fast. Are there any questions before you guys get started? All right, go ahead.